We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. Nick Barris here along with Clarksville Mayor Kim McMillan. It's nice to have her on, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Talking with her about the Mayor's Compact to combat hate, extremism, bigotry. She's a mayor, and she saw what happened with the mayor in Charlottesville, how horrified he was in the aftermath of that march and the violence that came out after the fact on all that. And the question of how mayors across the country see that and say, all right, because you know there are going to be other efforts. And as we went to break, I was saying that there's already a permit in place going where there's going to be a Klan rally in East Tennessee addressing an issue they're concerned about, another one of these Confederate monuments or statues being removed there. It's being discussed, and they want to have their rally. Now, they're going to have a right, no matter how repugnant their message may be, to rally if they go through the proper channels, correct? Correct. So I don't want you to speak for the mayor there in Knoxville, but if that was happening in Clarksville, they go through the proper channels. And you were telling me during the break, it's not necessarily just a rubber stamp. You want to march, you get it, right? Correct. It's not, is it case by case, or there is a set criteria everyone has to go through?
Well, there is a set criteria, but it is developed on a case by case basis. It depends on what you're attempting to get the permit for. We have parade permits, which means you're going to march on the street for whatever reason, whether it's a parade, whether it's any kind of thing. If it involves closing the streets to traffic, then that involves a lot of pre-planning. It involves a lot of the ability to say, well, which streets do you want to close? Where do you want to march? Because we have streets sometimes we can't close. You can't march down those streets because of traffic. That's right. So that requires a lot of pre-planning to make sure that everybody does that. I mean, we go through this with our Christmas parade every year to make sure that we're doing this. So everybody has to go through the same process. If you just want an assembly permit, which means just to assemble in one place,
like a park or something.
Correct. Then there are other requirements, and especially if you want to do it in a public park, which means obviously there are limitations on what you can do because public parks are open to everybody. So you can't just have private groups come and say, well, we want to close a public park down in order that we can go and assemble in the public park. So we have a lot of, there are restrictions, but they're there, they're done for the safety of the public, they're done for the benefit of the public. So you have to meet all of those restrictions.
Including maybe hiring security?
Exactly. You have to be able to show that you can provide the necessary security to guard against any events that can happen. I mean, for instance, if you're doing a parade down the street and you want to close the streets, which means the traffic signals don't work, you have to provide the security because the taxpayers shouldn't be paying to provide that security for your group that is seeking to get the permit. So that's something you have to justify that you can provide off-duty police force or off-duty guards or somebody that has the ability to do that.
Okay, but as long as they provide all the criteria like any group does, it wouldn't be your role to say, all right, you provided everything, but I see the purpose of your march is clearly going to incite a reaction, and we don't want that in the city of Clarksville. You can't do this.
No, we cannot judge the permitting requirement on the basis of the content of the speech.
And I understand that completely. So it's a constitutional right to allow them to do that.
That's right.
All right, let's take a call real quickly from Brian, see what he thinks. Brian, good morning.
I disagree with the distinguished gentle lady mayor from Clarksville.
All right, what do you disagree with?
The group does not have to supply any of their own security. That is false. They get a legal permit to go anywhere. They should be able to be protected by the police force. Now, she's wrong in that case. Also, what is she crying about racism? The only racism I see is from the anti-fats and the Black Lives Matter movements. And by the way, Clarksville, they got their own problems with these soldiers going AWOL and killing people. What's up with that?
Well, that's a separate issue, you know, as that goes. Now, what about, is he right about that? I mean, in terms of
what he's right about is that we and the police, we have the duty, and we will continue to provide the duty to protect the public from violence if that ensues.
Meaning that you'd have your own folks out there regardless of whether or not you have to.
But if they're asking for a permit that requires the streets to be closed, for example, so you have to have people that, you have to have law enforcement that will be at intersections, for example, if the street's closed, to allow people to realize that you don't need to come through, that you're closing off the street. Right. So you've got to be able to say you can go ahead and go through the light. It's like in a funeral procession or something of that nature. And what we're saying is, in that case, we usually require the person seeking the permit to provide the necessary just force, off-duty police officers that they pay for instead of the taxpayers paying for it, just to help them navigate the streets. But now, if there is the need for protection from violence, our police force will be out there. You know, it's not something that they have to provide and pay for.
Okay, but the permitting process, if they're choosing to go through roads, apparently would require them to have to provide some of the security or the staffing for the intersections and things like that.
Correct.
So, all right, and would you have a conversation with an organization that was planning a protest? Would you want to reach out to them ahead of time to just talk to them about what your plans are, how that goes? Not to intimidate them, but would you do something like that, perhaps, the organizer?
We do that. We do that
with everyone.
Almost with everyone. Our Parks and Recreation Department, which is the department that's responsible for issuing the permits, works in conjunction with the police department and the other departments that are necessary, and they talk to the person seeking the permit to explain to them what potential issues could arise, how they can solve certain problems, how they might want to alleviate issues by choosing another route if they're trying a march down the public streets, and which direction they should go. So it's really an issue of cooperation. It's an issue of talking to everyone, because, you know, remember I told you that there are 10 principles in our compact, and one of the principles, the third principle, is ensuring public safety while protecting free speech and other basic constitutional rights. So
you have to
what
balance
we want to do,
that,
you got to balance that. We have to, you know, protect the public safety, but we also want to allow people to exercise their constitutional rights and that of free speech. And so I think it's possible. We have never had a issue in Clarksville balancing these situations, but we just want to make sure after Charlottesville that doesn't happen. And I know that Mayor O'Hara in Knoxville is really looking at what she can do and issues that she can address, so that issue that she's having there doesn't become like Charlottesville.
Well, okay, let's just assume there or in your city that permit is granted. They follow all the criteria.
Yeah.
All right, so there likely would be a counter protest of some type that would show up. I mean, it just may happen. That happens. It doesn't always turn violent like Charlottesville, but there's counter protest. Part of the trick, it seems to me, and there was some debate after the fact in Charlottesville, is knowing when to pull the plug on the march, or when, as you watch it from afar and you're the law enforcement agency, deciding when to intervene and get in. And that's a judgment call, I guess. And I don't know if the mayor would be part of that decision-making process, or you leave it to your chief, as they're observing the situation and deciding, all right, tensions are heating. We see some weapons on this side. We've seen weapons on this side. They're getting closer. They're yelling. They're converging. When do you move in? How do you make that call?
Well, that's something that I think you really have to leave to the hands of those professionals that make these decisions, like your police chief and your other law enforcement officials. They can correspond. It's like decisions that you make as to whether you're going to shut the city down because of snow. I mean, when we, in the wintertime, those decisions, we get up early, we talk to the street department, we talk to the building and codes department, the public works department, all of those departments. We make the decision together as to whether we're going to take that kind of action. The same is true in this situation. If it appears as if things are getting out of hand and out of control, you have to give the authority to those agencies who are the ones that actually need to make those decisions, just like they would in any type of law enforcement response to any particular situation.
Yeah, you have to decide, you know, maybe before the first punch is thrown. It's a tough call. A lot of times when you think it's going to snow and you're going to cancel school, and then you don't get any snow overnight. But you make that call just in case. But yeah, do you wait, and then do you make that call before the violence erupts, or do you have to wait for the first punch, in which case you could have a riot on your hands? It is a hard thing to manage.
Exactly. But see, that's what the compact is about. It's about telling mayors that you have the bully pulpit. You have the ability to speak out. So, for example, if you know it's coming and you know that there could be the possibility of some type of incident because of a protest and a counter protest and a march and rallies, then mayors have the duty to speak up in advance. Go out and tell people, here is what is going to happen. We are urging everybody to keep calm. We're urging everybody to follow the laws. We're urging everybody to make sure that they don't do anything that could lead into that avenue. And so I think that's where mayors can really step in on the front end to reassure people that that's not going to happen.
Let's take a break on that note. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation, maybe take some more phone calls, 737-7587, on how mayors or how the community can deal with this, because it's going to come up again. We just know it is. We'll be back more with the Clarksville Mayor, Kim McMillan, right after this. Stay with us.